say, Jesus, let your kingdom come. Let it come here in our midst. Just sing it with us as we worship God and sing God. Here we go. Jesus, let your kingdom come here. Yes, say it. Let your will be done here. In my life, oh God.
King of heaven, come.
Now that's our prayer, Father. I just want to say thank you, God, for being with us in worship this morning. Thank you, God, that we can unite our hearts together in prayer. And even as you come to the communion table this morning, especially when you offer your offering, and oftentimes we think God needs our resources, God needs our talents. God doesn't need all of that. God requires your life and my life. If you will say to God as we close this worship time, as one last song, because it's so appropriate as we sing this song, what God requires of you and me is to give our hearts completely to Him. If you know the song, just sing with us. Or if you just want to worship God, if you want to close your eyes and just lift your hearts and say to God, God, everything matters because there's nothing that I can offer you. Really, Lord, there is nothing that I can offer you this morning that will not please you. But if I just offer my life, just simple, broken and weak it is.
Blessed
gospel portion is taken from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 14, verse 1, and then from 7 through 14. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 14, beginning from verse 1. On one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader of the Pharisee to eat a meal on the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. Then from verse 7. When he noticed how the guests chose their places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down in the place of honor, in case someone more distinguished than you have been invited by your host. And the host who invited both of you may come and say to you, give this person your place. And then in disgrace, you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to your friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of those all who sit at the table with you. All who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. The word of the Lord.
Thanks
be to God. God, I pray a blessing on a word that comes to us, especially as we start this new year, oh God. Maybe there is something that you are reminding us as a congregation. I pray that you would come alive in the preaching of your word. I pray that you would speak to us, oh God, not just as individuals, but as congregation, Lord. And so to that, God, we come at this time and we ask your blessing. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Please be seated. Since we have a few things going on here, I'll try to keep it short. But there's something that the kind of God was reminding me, even as I read this text. Just bear with me, just hold on to your attention for just a few minutes. We'll go through the text, and there's something that God laid in my heart, and I want to offer that to you, just not only for ourselves, but for us as a congregation. As we start this new year, what is it that God was wanting us to do? What is it that God is wanting us to do? And every September comes, even though it's a school year for the children, I think it's a beginning for us as a church, isn't it? It's not necessarily the first of the year, but even as we start September, what is it that God wants us to do? So when I was reading this text, just an ordinary text, is it right? Just something that just comes alive. And I think, for us as Indians, we love parties, isn't it? We just need any reason to throw a party. Even if there is a small thing that happens, we'll have a party. Somebody's going away, we'll have a party. The children turn one, we have a party. Even though the child does not know what the party is all about, isn't it? But the parents want to have a party, right? For everything and anything, we have a party. Isn't it? And sometimes, what happens is we cannot keep a short list, isn't it? We want those long lists. We don't know who to invite and who not to invite sometimes. And sometimes our children get very upset. Gosh, why do we have to have such a big parties? But we love parties, isn't it? And we don't know how to shortlist our parties. We want to invite everybody. We don't want to leave anybody out. We really don't want to, because we are a small community, and so we don't want to leave people out. We want to be inclusive. We want to get everybody in there. Is that right? So I was thinking to myself, and I remember flying in 92, I was going to go home to get married, and I flew from Singapore to Chennai, and I was sitting down with somebody next to me, and she was talking to me, and we had a great conversation. She was from a school here. She had been doing some work, and then she asked me, looks at me, and she said, "What are you going home for?" And I said, "I'm going home to get married." So, "Oh, that's really nice." And then I looked at her and said, "Why don't you come for my wedding?" I said, somebody will say, "Gosh, how can you invite people, somebody you don't know? Here we have a guest list and we are sticking to it, and you want to invite somebody." But that's how Indian parties are, isn't it? People crash parties in India. Literally, gate crashers are there in India. Oh, I know this person, I know the groom, I know the bride. And they crash parties. And Jesus was living at a time like that. Jesus was living at a time when people would crash parties. It can be a private party because sometimes the houses were in such a design in such a way that somebody who is walking on the side will look at something that's going on and can come into a party. Remember the time when Jesus was in this house and the woman came and wiped Jesus' feet? You remember that story? Pours ointment and wipes. Right? And one of the gospel lessons says she was not a good woman. And then you might ask yourself, how can somebody who's not so good and a Pharisee who's probably very high in the society can invite somebody? But those are party crashers. People can walk inside parties. So today's story is very simple. And I want to read that story with you. So if you have your Bibles with you, just open it for a few minutes. I just want to look through a couple of things in the text and then I will close it. Because there's something that God laid in my heart, not just for you, and for us as a congregation. What is it that this text has to offer for us? It says, on one occasion, when Jesus was going to the house of a leader, the Pharisee, to eat a meal on the Sabbath day. Those are not good words. Look at the words. It says, on one occasion, Jesus, the leader of the Pharisee, to eat a meal and on a Sabbath. Whenever you see 4 words like this, you can immediately tell there is a problem there. Is that right? Every time Jesus was in a Sabbath time, he went to a place and it was Sabbath, and he will do something, he will get into trouble. So when you read a text like this, you know there is something coming. Am I making sense? Are you awake? Just a few minutes, okay? I'm seriously saying, sometimes you look very uninterested. There's so many things, and I know there are so many things that are going on in your life right now. Maybe you're sitting down here and you're saying, hey, I have to buy the school list for my daughter. This pastor is going on and on. Is it right? So just bear with me. There is something that I wanted to offer to you, and then I will. So look at it. It says that Jesus was going and goes to a Pharisee's house, and there is a meal and there is a Sabbath day, and immediately you can tell there is a problem. Is that right? And then the next one immediately says, and they were watching him closely. I was telling during the first service, just imagine if somebody invites you to a party just to see how you behave. Just imagine. What a terrible thing to do, isn't it? Hey, I invited you because I need to see how you are doing. No, they didn't invite me to enjoy the party, but they invited me to watch me closely. I think that's a terrible thing to invite Jesus, is that right? They were trying to set him up so that he will fail. I thought it's a very sad thing to do. When we set up things for somebody to either succeed or fail, especially when they are to fail, it's a hard thing to do, isn't it? But that's what it says, right? They set him up to see what he will do. And then in the verse that I did not read, it says there was a man who came with dropsy. Dropsy is a disease where your skin puffs up, your whole body puffs up, because there is water accumulation in you. And it's a very dangerous thing, isn't it? When water accumulates in your body, especially in your lungs, it just constricts you and you're not able to breathe and you can die. And I was asking myself a very simple question that I asked myself, this is a Pharisee who's probably a very well-known person in there, and he invites a man who's sick. Or was this man a party crasher? Are you with me? So this man is having dropsy and comes inside, and Jesus heals him. But then I asked myself the question, why is Luke telling this story before, and right after the story he goes and tells about the party? Why is he doing it? Why is he telling about the man with dropsy? I'll come back to it. Just bear with me. And then Jesus goes on and he says, look at verse 7. It says, when he noticed how the guests chose places of honor, he told them a parable. Now Jesus oftentimes will go into a place, will sit down, and before he even talks, he will observe everything. During Jesus' time, when they had a party, what was called a symposia. A symposia is a place, most of the parties are like symposias, because you go there, you have a meal, and then you have a discussion. Now what is happening here is Jesus is having a meal, and now he has a discussion. So Jesus looks around and he sees how people choose their place of honor. Sometimes in our parties, we have tables with names on it, isn't it? So you know where to sit down. But in Jesus' time, you were given places of honor because you are of your age or your importance in society. Is that right? So you cannot just grab a place. But even there, people will grab a place because they want to be prominent in that particular party. I don't think we are like that, isn't it? When I go to a party, and especially with my wife, when I walk into a party, she will find the place where nobody will notice her. We go sit down on that corner. That's what she'll say. But then here, where people going and picking places of honor, they want to be recognized. They want to be prominent. Isn't it? I don't think we are like that, is it? I don't think we are like that. But then I asked myself the question, why did Luke tell the story of the man with dropsy, and then he comes to this parable of picking our seats? Does it make sense? Doesn't make sense, isn't it? Because dropsy, remember I told you, dropsy is a disease where your body is filled with fluid, and if you ask the patient who is literally dying of dropsy, what do you want? You know what they will say? Water. When they are not supposed to drink water. They know that if they drink water, they will die, but yet they want. What is the connection there? It's because you and me, innately, because of our fallenness, we desire positions of prominence. Knowing that the prominence will only lead us to our downfall, yet we ask for it. Yet we desire for it. So when Jesus is telling the story of the man in dropsy, he's reminding those Pharisees and others who are looking for prominence, who are looking for places of honor. And Jesus reminds them, hey, listen, if you go to those places, you will be humbled. It won't really help you. Don't do it. Now you might ask me, how does this make sense to us as a congregation? I don't think we as a congregation look for prominence. We want to quietly come in and quietly go out. But sometimes that's not how it works. I'm sad to say sometimes, we love places of prominence in our lives. Isn't it? Pastor, I didn't want to come today because I was not helping with worship today. Oh, Pastor, I didn't want to come today because today is not council meeting, isn't it? I am not part of the council. You and I have an innate desire to love places of honor. And Jesus says to you and to me, be very careful how you do it. Because when you choose places of honor and prominence, it's not good. But that when it's given to you, then it is good. Am I making sense? When you choose on your own, it will humble you. But when it is given to you, Jesus says, it will exalt you. And then Jesus goes on to say, look at the next parable. He says, he also said to the one who had invited him. Now the first parable is a story just to remind the guests how you need to sit. So somebody said, the story is not about a parable. It's a strategy. So the first strategy is to the people who get invited, right? The second story is to people who invite. It's like a host. And Jesus says very simply who you are supposed to invite. During Jesus' time, what happens is you get invited. The reason why I get invited is because I can return that favor. That's why we invite people. That's why during Jesus' time, you get invited. And so Jesus turns the whole table around, isn't it? He says, when you invite, don't invite people who can invite you back. I wonder, what does your guest list look like? I'm being very serious. What does your guest list look like? Do your guest list look like strangers? Does it include strangers? Because the reason why I say that is, oftentimes there are people sometimes who walk inside our congregation. People who are new. And we sometimes don't know how to welcome them. They will come downstairs, they will stand for some time, they will be in one corner. Sometimes we'll have a little bit of conversation and then we'll leave them alone. And I've asked people, why is it so hard to do that? You know what they'll say, Pastor, it takes extra energy to talk somebody I don't know. Isn't it? It does. It really does. But Jesus is making it so harder. He doesn't say just invite strangers. He's saying to you and to me, invite people who are lame, who are crippled, who are blind, who are just worthless. That's the kind of a list that Jesus says you need, and you and I need to have. And I would look at Jesus and Jesus, that's a hard thing to do. I think it's hard to do. So when I kept asking, going back and reading that story over and over again, and I asked myself the question, is Jesus telling us as a congregation that we need to be good invitees? That we need to be a good host? I think this is what, I'll just close with this couple of words. I think the reason why Luke tells the story is to tell us a couple of things. He basically says to you and to me, in our own weakness and brokenness, our list will always exclude people. Make sense? In our brokenness, in your brokenness, in my brokenness, in your weakness and my weakness, in our own, we wanted to be for ourselves, our list will always be exclusive. We will want to have certain people with us and certain people will get excluded. But I think he's saying a little bit more. I think God's list is not a great guest list. It's a grace list. Making sense? Luke just wants to remind you and me that at the end of time, God is going to throw a party. God is going to throw a party. And in that party, it will not be just people who look like us, who talk like us. It's going to be a party with so many different colors, with so many different languages. And then he's asking you and me as a church, are you ready for it? Am I making sense? Folks, the reason why this is the regular reading for our Sunday. The reason why I want to go back to this story and I read it again and again is because as we begin this year, we've been praying through our fasting and prayer. I believe with all of my heart that beginning this year, God is going to bring people into this congregation who will not look like us, who will not speak like us, who will not behave like us. And when that happens, will we be a welcoming congregation? Are you with me? As we begin this new year, will we be a welcoming congregation? Will we invite, will we embrace people who will come into this place? Or will we say to them, don't look like us? Because there is a church in Pennsylvania who for the longest time they were a small church and they began to grow big, but then they would throw parties to the community. Simply they will throw parties to the community. Not that these parties will bring in new members, but that it will earn a goodwill in the community. Isn't it beautiful? I think God has placed us in this community so that we can be welcoming, not because they will come and become church members, but that we will remind them of God's great party at the end of times, and that all of them out there are included in this party. Isn't it beautiful? As I said, I believe with all of my heart that God's going to do a new thing this year. God's going to do amazing things in this new year. God will bring people very different race into this place. Will we join the party? Or will we stand out and say, God, this is not for me? And I'm going to pray with you. I'm going to just pray with you. Now, if any of the words that I said to you made any sense to you, and if you believe sitting down in that pew, if you believe that God's going to do a new thing in this church, then you, in the quietness of your heart, say to God, God, I just want to offer my hands to you. I want to be that welcoming person. I want to show the love that you showed me. If you will say that, you don't say that to impress me, you say that to God. If you say that this morning, God will use you. Doesn't matter where you are. Doesn't matter what your gifts are. It really doesn't matter to God. God's got it. Just don't worry. God will do something beautiful in this place. So God, we humble ourselves before you. And we give you thanks. Thank you for picking us as a church. Thank you for using us in amazing ways in the days and the years to come. That you will do something beautiful in this place and we will stand and watch. And we will only be partners to that, oh God. We thank you, we love you. In Jesus' most precious name we pray. Amen. Amen.